All right, I am now recording. All right, so we have another episode to talk about today, and this is a good one. Wouldn't you say?
Uh, it's it's fine for me, but probably yeah, good.
I mean,
Like it,
obviously,
it
I think it's an Ono episode, so pretty good just generally around. I will say there's probably one or two things with the new character Croden. I'm not super. I feel like he has a little bit like inconsistent acting in the sense
mm,
of sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's not. I think part of it is the direction because it doesn't seem like he's we'll get to it, but his motivation for this episode is like very clear and very like I can understand why he'd be super motivated to fulfill his motivation, and he
uh,
seems almost like flippant about it early on, almost like he kind of is non-committed to certain actions.
well, he's trying to entice someone here to go along with it.
Yeah,
Of like,
I guess like yeah, I just
if
mean
he
in
if
I
he
just
lets on too much that he wants this, it's like it's basically he's trying to sell the other person on it without like it's one of the things of like if you push too much to make the sale, you scare off the person
I
and you
agree with
don't.
that. I agree with that. But I actually mean like well before that.
Mm,
So uh, we can kind of just jump right into the episode because we'll be spoiling a little bit more if we just kind of if we just kind of like ignore that and just keep pushing forward. So the first thing we see in this episode is we have Odo questioning Quark. Uh, you know, he says there's been some unusual activity lately, uh, and Quark is basically just saying, "Look, a reputation like mine has probably been exaggerated." Like basically, there's a ship on board with it's a Miradon ship, and Odo suspects that there's going to be criminal activity, and of course he assumes Quark is involved because Quark is always involved.
yeah, it's always Quark. Who causes the problem? Quark.
Yeah, and let's see. We get the first mention of the secondary character in this episode, Croden. Uh, Odo's kind of wondering who he is. He's someone from the Gamma Quadrant, and Odo asks like, "What about him?" And Quark basically says like, "Look, he's just harmless." Which I do like that. There's a little bit of a back and forth here where they show Quark does kind of cooperate with like the station. If he
Hmm.
believes someone is harmless, he is going to point out that he's harmless because he legitimately does believe this guy's harmless.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
with like he gives Odo that information because Odo's worried about it, as opposed to hiding that information, which could only benefit Quark. If
Hmm.
Odo was focused on someone else, it would help Quark perform his actions, which I don't think his actions are actually illegal. If what we see happen really does like Quark is clearly covering his bases here to not get in trouble legally. And what happens is Odo basically says the twin Miradorns just nodded at Quark, and Quark is like, "Look, I'm the man behind the bar. Obviously, they want to use a hollow suite. I'm gonna go serve them. It's like, here, order a drink, play the tables, or vacate the premises." And basically tells Quark to or tells Odo to leave. And
Yeah.
we get a nice little transition scene where Quark tells Odo or Quark tells Rom to prepare some drinks for the guests, and Rom puts four glasses on a tray. And let's see, I want to try and get the image here. Yeah, he puts four glasses on a tray along with some ale, and then when he turns away to grab the ale, he sets it on the tray, and now there's five glasses on the tray, and Odo's nowhere to be seen. So
Yeah.
it's fairly obvious, but it's done in a very I can't really show it unfortunately, or else we might get hit with a copyright strike. But it happens very seamlessly. You just see Odo watching Rom performing these actions, and suddenly there's a fifth glass on there. So it works out
I
very well.
do kind of. Well, I kind of have a problem with it because normally when Odo does this sort of thing, we hear some sort of noise. It's like
True.
we
I
don't
mean,
we don't hear it here.
that's fair. What I would say is that noise is never really acknowledged in the series. I'm trying to
Hmm.
think because we obviously deal with more changelings later, but I'm trying to remember if there's ever a moment in time where they comment on like hearing the noise of a shapeshifter. I don't think they do, so I always kind of just assume that noise is more for our benefit. I will agree it's a little bit of an inconsistency here. I think you could have easily just had like the noise happen off screen and then we see the five glasses and like just point out that no, that wouldn't work either because Ferengi have insanely good hearing. So if the noise is
Yeah.
in universe, he would know. Rom's also an
Yeah,
idiot.
that's true. Rom is also an idiot.
It's a loud room. It's
Also,
a loud room. There's he's focused on not pissing off his brother. I can believe it without too much worry, but I'll agree the inconsistency with the noise is like my only thing is like, are we sure that noise is something that we know that happens sort of in canon, or is it just like for our benefit? And I
pretty
wonder,
sure
could
we see people react to it, but not like verbally. They like notice the sound, if that makes
we'll have
sense.
to pay attention to that going forward. But one thing I do want to point out is that doesn't mean he can't shapeshift silently. There's just rarely a reason to do it. When he
Yeah,
shapeshift, a lot of
but
times it's to when no one's nearby, or when he's he doesn't mind if people see him. Like he'll transform into a rat and he'll untransform, and the noise will happen. So it's like he doesn't care if people hear that because he's untransforming from a rat. Whereas here, theoretically, he could try and do it silently, right?
no, when he did it as a rat, he was on board a Cardassian ship where, hey, stealth is a thing you need to be worried about here. It's inconsistency. It has to be
I was
inconsistent.
referring to the time when he was looking at like a bust in one of the hangars, if you recall. But uh,
Uh, yeah. Either way, it's like it's one of those things. Like, yeah, they definitely made a change here, and it's like, I'm gonna acknowledge it because like this is a clear.
that's no,
It's
that's
like,
fair. That's I mean, we're here to be pedantic, but
yeah.
I also think that it's I guess part of why they didn't play the sound is they want the nice reveal that if you notice the five glasses on the tray, it's an easy notice. But if you did, you get a kind of little, it's a nice little treat for you as a viewer where you're basically like, hey, I noticed that and I realized what Odo's doing, as opposed to if they played the noise and made it a lot more obvious. So
Yeah, and the thing is like if it's one of the things like, oh, it's a neat little thing. And it's like, yeah, but you sacrifice consistency of the story in the name of doing that. It's
yeah, I'm agreeing. I'm
like,
agreeing with you. I just think like that. I think that's why they did it, and I
hmm
agree that I think it's a very minor problem at most. But yeah, I'll agree because I mean, again, you could have just played the noise and just had Rom not react to it. Rom not being
yeah,
very intelligent and being a loud casino bar place. You know, he misses the
yeah,
noise of the shapeshifter.
yeah. Or at most, he like hears it and is like, huh, that sounds. But then he's just like, loses it.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean
you know,
that'd be another thing he could do. But anyway, so you know, we get the intro sequence, and then we enter the Hollow Suite, which these two Miradons are trying to sell what looks like a Fabergé egg to Quark. And let me see if I can recall something here. Oh yeah, let's see. Quark mentions like, oh, it's very nice. Unfortunately, the buyer has backed out. Uh, One of the two Miradons, Rokel, mentions like he guaranteed a buyer, and he's like, look, you know, a question has been raised about this little Bobble's origin. A
hmm
similar one was taken during a raid, and as a result, if you had a bill of sale, I could guarantee a buyer. But the implication is Quark knows this is the stolen one, right? He's
yeah,
talking around it. He's saying, look, this is stolen property. If you can give me a bill of sale, and this is something that's interesting because we see the glass tray placed down, so we know Odo's also in this room. Quark
hmm
doesn't. Quark, I believe, later reacts in a way where he didn't realize Odo was here. So this is just how Quark reacts. Quark's actually a little bit more upstanding than we might have assumed. He's not willing to just do illegal actions.
No. So you're going to notice. Uh, uh, let's finish this scene because, like,
Well, I mean, yeah,
no.
I
So
think like there's an element of he would break the law there, but he's particularly asking for a bill of sale.
no. So here's the thing. Here's the thing. Much more likely is uh, Quark knows it was stolen. And he, as the fixer, has the power here to basically set the terms and such of it. Now, we know that a certain someone's going to come in through that door with a gun, ready to steal the egg. And then we get
Oh,
the
that's true.
implication later on that, oh, Pork knew he was going to come in, like Odo points it out. So what happened was Odo basically, made contact with these two in some way. Either he gave the idea like, hey, this is something you could steal, I can sell it, make a profit, or they did. And now that they're here, stuck with the stolen goods, Quark says, "Oh, you have to have a bill of sale to basically delay them leaving." So then his associate, who basically offered a better price of like getting stealing it for him, can get it for him by threatening to once he makes his case. Basically, he said these like no matter how this goes, Fork was looking to make even bigger profit at the expense of these two by fucking them over. He
True.
knew
I did
because
forget about that, and that does recontextualize why he pointed out that Croden is not a threat because he's relying on Croden.
yeah,
So I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I guess I like he is trying to delay. He is trying to delay them, so it's not really. But at the same time, we do know Quark does a lot of dubious actions that aren't strictly illegal. You
yeah.
know,
Things that he has
he'll
plausible plausible
yeah.
deniability about.
It's a much later episode, but there's the episode where he gets into arms trading briefly, and
Yeah,
they make a point that they're never allowed to bring these weapons on the station, but they can use the holodeck to simulate the weapons, uh,
yeah,
entertain buyers with them, and then schedule drops for the actual weapon later on. So
yeah. Plus,
that's getting around the letter of the law by like, well, we never brought the weapons on the station. I
yeah,
feel Quark's a lot more in the realm of because obviously Quark knows he's being watched by Odo, right? Any illegal action that he does is going to get him behind bars, but Odo can't get him on this, and we know Odo's competent, so we have to assume Quark is equally competent at not being caught or
yeah,
not doing anything specifically illegal enough to be arrested for.
yeah.
Yeah, and let's see here. Uh, yeah, so Quark is demanding a bill of sale. Croden comes in, and this is one of the scenes that was very like, I don't really know how I like this because the way Croden's acting is very cavalier.
Hmm.
Maybe you could disagree with me on that, but he kind of comes in. He's sort of limply holding the phaser. He doesn't seem to be like. I'd expect more of him like, if he's experienced with this, I'd expect him more to be in the realm of, not taking this in lightly. He's keeping it trained on specific individuals. He's keeping his back from them. He's staying as far away from them for possible. If he's not trained, I'd expect him to make more be more nervous. Whereas where he's
So he
acting here,
does stutter. He does
yeah,
stutter. He repeats "stay, stay, stay" a couple times. He's like, getting caught on it. It's like his first, but then he gets into the rhythm of it. Now we learn later on he has killed, but
yeah,
it was a force of like it was a case of it was either kill or be killed. In his case, like he is not a natural he can live with it if it gets what he wants, but he's not a natural he's not a professional killer by trade. He's normally like, oh, like if like he is someone who's forced into this situation, but he's willing to go through with it for what he and it's like I think it's fine because if he had overplayed it, like the nervousness, it might have been like, oh, you like look at Quark, you trusted this guy to get this job done, but this level is like, okay, this is like, have you heard the story about the in China? There was like a real estate deal that was going to go bad, so one of the people hired a hitman to kill the other guy in the deal, and that
I have not
hitman
heard that.
so he was going to get paid like $10,000 to do it. He subcontracted the kill to another killer and said, if you do this, you'll get $5,000. And it's like, okay, yeah. But then that one subcontracted to another one for
Okay, I think I
2,500, and it
have
got
heard
to
of
the
this.
yeah, and it got to like the point where the last one went to the guy who was going to be killing. So like, hey, they want me to kill you. Just fake your death for a couple days. And all the people up the chain of command. It's like that. It's like you know, he it's
Real
basically
Attack of the
like
Clone situation there.
yeah. Fork was basically like subletting, like actually taking the egg by force to someone else, and it's like paying him less because he's less qualified, but
No,
probably gonna work out. Like
I get what you're saying, right? I think my issue is more how it's presented in the scene. Uh, and again, I could kind of play it. It doesn't seem like he's playing it up nervously, and it doesn't seem like he's playing it up competently. And it just this is why like what I mentioned before, where it doesn't really seem like a lot of what he's doing is towards this really serious goal that we later learn he has.
hmm,
And it seems like because I remember even when I first watched this and when we were rewatching it, and anytime I've rewatched this episode, I've always watched him and thought he feels like almost like inebriated.
Mm,
Like he's kind of
mm,
he's swinging it around. He's not making like juddery motions. He almost looks very relaxed and non-committal to this action, and I think
mm,
that's meant to be. I don't think that's intentional. I think that might just be how it's portrayed. And like you're saying, he
mm,
seems like he might be nervous, and then he sort of gets more confident as the scene goes on, which I'd be willing to believe. But just how it's presented makes me feel like he's not taking this very seriously, and that's
mm.
why I kind of got like I feel this is weird because later in the episode he's not like this at all. He's a lot more
Yeah.
he's a lot more cunning, a lot more driven. It's really just this scene that's a little bit like
I think
uh,
it's because it could possibly result in him having to kill somebody. Later on, he's just
yeah,
manipulating Odo.
like I said, I don't think it's played nervously. I think it's played weirdly incompetently, and it's a small acting gripe. It's not too bad, but uh, one thing
No,
I do
it
like.
destroys the whole episode.
So anyway,
Destroys it.
a conflict breaks out. The Myrmidons shoot. They miss. He shoots and he hits one of them. He hits let's see, not Akel. He hits Rokel, and Rokel dies.
Hmm. Mm.
The table gets flipped, and the glasses get shattered. One thing that's, I guess, a neat little detail is Odo. His glass gets shattered, and it just reforms into a single entity. So you can't like break. You can't really like physically harm a changeling. Later learn
Well,
that.
you say that, but there is an inconsistency in this episode with that.
Well, I no,
Uh,
not like you can harm a changeling. Just I don't think you can like if you break the glass into multiple pieces. Uh, each piece like reunites together. Although I guess I do wonder if he stayed as like a shattered piece of glass, and what you took those glass and you moved it away, what would happen to it?
mhm.
Would it be a tiny little conscious Odo, or would it be?
Mm,
I don't know.
um, that there's issues of like he's constantly changing his like I don't know like the whole thing with changelings is just a question of like how are you just putting all your matter into a small space and such? Because we learn later on, it's like, oh, like the droplet becomes the ocean becomes the droplet, right? And
Yeah.
it's just,
Well, I mean,
yeah, it's,
even a little bit of a less of a uh, confusing one because that wouldn't make any sense until we get to that part of the series. At one point, Odo can change into birds. He does that regularly, and it's like, well, wait a
yeah,
minute. The only reason birds can fly is because physically they are light enough to be
yeah,
able to lift themselves. Like they have hollow bones and they're not heavy at all. So if he's the same amount of matter, then he would have to like disproportionately have larger wings to fly. Like he wouldn't be able to do it. The matter physics with how Odo works is never going to be scientifically consistent. So we kind of just have to
yeah.
wave it away as weird alien sci-fi magic, right? It's just they
Mhm.
can change into this. They can change their matter and size. They're moderately consistent with it. There might be one or two instances where they're not, but for the most part, it's fine. Again, like he changed it to this glass, and Rom picked it up without any issue. And speaking of that, like
Yeah,
I do like that even in all this chaos, Quark takes a second to criticize Rom. He's like
of
five
course.
glasses for four people. Uh, it's just I like that how quickly like Quark picked up on it. Like he immediately realized, crap. Like,
Mm.
but yeah, that's how that scene ends. Odo apprehends Croden, and they have security come in. Bashir, checks that Rokel is dead and shakes his head no. He doesn't say anything. I don't know if he has any other lines. I think he has a few lines this episode, but uh, then we get to the security office and we learn something about the Miradorns. Do we ever see Miradorns in TNG?
I don't think so. I know we see a similar race where it's like, oh, they're twins, but I think this is
The
their only
Bynars.
appearance. Yeah, the Binars, which,
Oh,
appropriate name. But
um, interesting. So, one thing he does say is a line. Uh, have you ever known any twinned Miradorns? Cisco says he hasn't. And he says, in my species, we're not just twin brothers. Together we are a single self, two halves of one being. I am incomplete now. Which is really sad. Like, obviously that's terrible. That, like, literally
mhm,
a physical half of you is pretty much gone. I wonder if
yeah.
that's just only for twinned Miradorns? Or, like, are all Miradorns born twins? I don't know. But
No, he very specifically specifies, have you known any twin Mirador? So he's implying that you can meet non-twin Mirador.
yeah,
Like that,
I suppose so. Yeah, I guess that would be like the case.
yeah,
But
very important thing. Otherwise, it's like, oh, wouldn't every Mirador be, twinned? And it's like,
well,
well,
I actually I was thinking like that could either be like a telling line or it could be something that's more in the realm of trying to explain that to the audience. Because
hmm
I think this is the first time we've really ever seen this species. But yeah, I'll interpret it that way because I think that's probably the better assumption is that not all of them are twinned, but the ones that are twinned have this really debilitating like situation where if one of you dies, the other is just like in physical pain. Because how he acts like he's in physical pain. He seems like
yeah,
fatigued and like in pain and unhappy. He's like oh god, this is horrible. Let's see.
hmm
Odo, callous as hell. In character, he's like, you should have considered that before. The risk. You should have considered the risks of buying stolen property. Like the whole idea of like, yeah, committing crimes leads to people getting
put
shot.
yourself at risk. It's like, yeah, like,
Yeah. He says, you have no proof that this thing was stolen. Odo basically says, yeah, but we have all this like circumstantial evidence that kind of implies that you stole it. Let's
hmm
see. Da-da-da. He says, "Oh, we bought it from this trader," and Odo's like, "Well, his name, his ship identification," and Akel, it's very clear that Akel's just trying to like distract from the situation by saying, "Oh, my brother was killed," uh, so they're trying to interrogate him. He's not answering their questions. He's trying to distract with other issues, which the scene pretty much ends with them being like, "All right, you know what? Our purpose here is done. Take him away." Let's see, and Quark is also like here, and they're basically like, "Can we do anything to him?" It's like, "Hey, you were in there. You heard me asking for a bill of sale." Like,
hmm hmm
Cisco's just more than happy to let the law deal with the Miradorn, but with Quark, it's like, yeah, we don't really have anything on him that we can just like arrest him for. He was acting as a reasonable citizen. And then Odo points out that Croden was armed with a Ferengi phaser, which Quark points out is available in many a port. Uh,
In fact, he
so
jumps to counteract it. It's like, mm, mm,
yeah, and well, yeah, the way
mm.
it's done is very much in the realm of like, again, it's the subtext. Quark knows, like Odo knows that Quark did it, but Odo can't prove it, and Quark knows it. So it's the subtext of he's not playing around. He has covered all his bases. Quark is pretty much going to walk free on this one. Let's see. Oh, Rom jumps in. How dare you suggest that my brother set up this robbery? Because again, like you were saying, it is implied that Quark basically was going to have these two rob the situation, uh, pretty
hmm
much get off scot free and then be able to sell the object himself. Uh,
Yep.
and then Odo, after Rom yells that, Odo's like, "That's an interesting theory, Rom." And Quark's like, "A theory that should have, if it ever reached the Miradorns, I'll wake up dead one morning." Which you ever seen Scary Movie 3?
Yeah, a while back. Yeah.
You want to have the argument if you can wake up dead?
No, you cannot wake up dead. If you die in your sleep, you are dead. You do not like you because if you're dead, like no, because if you're asleep, your consciousness is at a lower level at best, like where you're not conscious. So if you die, it's like okay, that is like that is the ceasing of consciousness because the body can no longer or keep it going. Like to be dead is to have no consciousness, so you cannot wake up and be dead. Like no, God, Holics, God, God, I'm gonna punch you.
Unless you're a zombie. Damn it! I can't find where's the
No,
script? I'm
no,
trying
that
to.
would assume we're. I would argue against that on the perspective of there is no. It's sort of like the teleporter issue here of like, is that really you after the teleportation? Is that really you after you become a zombie? Um, as given that you are acting completely counterintuitively to both how you as a person would and how you as a human would. Yeah, no, that's not you. So no.
Hold on, let's see here. Was it Scary Movie 3? Because I know they used like a lot of the same actors in between the movies, so I think it was Scary Movie 3. Either way, it's a stupid thing. How does someone wake up dead? It's like, well, what if you were woken up and then killed? It's like, well, they didn't wake up dead. And then of course they come to the
Unless
conclusion
you're a
that
zombie.
you can, unless you're a zombie, you can wake up dead
Yeah.
if you're a zombie. So yeah, like Quark basically is like, look, if those if that Miradorn ever thinks that that is a possibility, I'm gonna be killed. So don't spread around wild theories so casually. Uh, and
What
then
would have been
Quark.
funny after the last episode we had would be Rom just going, "You'd wake up dead, and I'd get the bar." Just
That would be funny. Like Rom is just like, oh no, you wake up dead. Ugh. I mean, it's such a shame that I would inherit your bar and all of your wealth, and then I would get to
it's like
sell
Mark
part of
and
you as part of. So oh god, well I'm gonna revisit this because uh there's an episode much later on where Quark thinks he's gonna die, so he's like pre-selling his vivisected remains,
yep,
and
and there's
uh
a futures market for it, which if anyone doesn't know what a futures market is, it's basically you placing bets on the price of commodities. Well, you can also do it with regular stocks, but that's just option. But anyways, basically for futures, it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna buy it at this price, and I'm gonna bet that the price will shoot up. Like I reserve the right to buy it at this price, and the fact of like, oh, you can do that with people's remains. It's just like, so you're incentivizing people to be murdered, right? Right?
yeah,
Agreed.
well, kind of in this sense, but remember, it's not murder; it's a business transaction. Uh,
Yeah,
but
yes, but within Korean culture, yes, it's just a business transaction. But it's just like you would think, like, would you really want to incentivize the premature death of your business leaders? No. Okay, don't have this marketplace that does that.
hey,
It's very
powerful business leaders who die, that becomes a gap in the market. But the point I'm trying to make is, at this point in time, like Cork was Grand Nagus for like a week.
yeah,
I
fresh
know
in
in
people's
that
memory.
I know in that episode, a lot of people treat it as like, oh yeah, he's like Cork's not worth too much. But
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm not gonna lie, if someone was Nagus for only a week, that's a pretty big like commodity. I feel, not as much as like
Yeah,
a
there's like the
lifelong
novels.
Nagus. Yeah, it's the novelty of like, yeah, this is the week
Yeah.
known as the week long Nagus Quark, right? Where it's like, so Rom is probably sitting there thinking like, if my brother dies, that's I can advertise his remains as the
Yeah,
temporary Nagus.
it's very much like looking at it as like, oh, there's like it's higher than Negus's who didn't do much, right, and just died in office naturally and all that. Um,
Well,
yeah, it's
yeah, it would be like the Nagus is that because first off, there's only a very limited supply of what the commodity is.
hmm
I think they make a point that's like it's like 80 like petri dishes worth of like a Nagus basically. So
hmm
like okay, that's 80 objects within the entire Ferengi Empire. So that's a pretty high market value. There's never going to be any more of a particular Nagus at least. Uh,
hmm
Similar to maybe like other world leaders and U.S. presidents. There's a lot of them that kind of just fall to the wayside.
hmm
There's the really big important
But if
ones that
you could
everyone
have
knows
a
about.
piece of JFK, if you could have a piece of JFK's brain, ooh boy, you'd get
Well,
some.
can I get one of the non-shot parts?
There it is.
But there it
There it
is.
is.
But the point I'm trying to make is like there's probably a few Naguses that are not
Oh
particularly
yeah.
valuable. Oh, you own a piece of of Lube the 14th or something, whatever they call their Naguses.
Lube.
Lube the 14th.
Uh,
And like it was a Nagus like 2000 years ago who served for like 40 years and like you were saying didn't really do much. He's just kind of there. He was kind of a seat holder, similar to how like we have some, presidents who are just like, yeah, like when they were in charge there was not really any wars, there was not any major conflict. They served 4 to 8 years and they did fine.
uh,
Like not terrible but not great.
I'm trying to think of one who would be like that.
Well, I mean,
Off the
obviously they're all important. I'm just mostly going along the realm of like, there's obviously the big ones, right? Anyone that's relatively recent, the ones that served in times of crisis, like Lincoln, you know, a lot of
Yeah, I would
them.
say like a lot of the like pre-depression, post World War One ones. Those, yeah, those.
Yeah, because it's just like a matter of like, yeah. So just like with Neguses, it'd be like, does anyone care about this Negus from like 3,000 years ago, or because the Frankie Empire has lasted 5,000 years? Does anyone care about this Negus from like 3,000 years ago that didn't really do much, or he
No.
did do much, but the effects are now pretty much all gone, or something like that? It's like, well, no.
Yeah,
Like,
pretty much.
do you want the remains of the dude who was Negus for like a week? It's like, I don't know. That's a
Yeah,
little bit more unique.
pretty much what we're saying, people, is that there's a novelty value to murdering Quark and selling his remains on the marketplace, and
Yeah.
that's
This
very
this
interesting.
is this is not an entirely morbid conversation about selling body parts.
Well, that's just how it be. You got a problem with it, take it up with PP.
Uh, so anyway, then we get to the part where they're checking on Croden, who hold on, I'm trying to get, yeah. So he is in one of the holding cells. It doesn't look like it. He looks like he's in the med bay at first, but he's in one of the holding cells. And he's kind of
Hmm.
just, again, this is another one of those things where he's like, don't you feed your prisoners? And Odo's like, the fact that you just kill the man doesn't affect your appetite. And Cronen's like, look, it was him or me. And if he'd kill me, I wouldn't be hungry now. Uh, I'm like, that's the thing, right? Like, this is kind of going back to how I feel about this character, where it's like this is weirdly nonchalant. We know what his motivation is, right? So
Hmm.
if again later in the episode he becomes a little bit more cunning and a little bit more like the lines he says are a lot more important and impactful, where
Hmm.
you feel, okay, I can see this guy is cunning enough to convince someone to help him perform his mission. Alternatively, you can have him be entirely nervous. Being in prison means that he's not going to be able to achieve the thing he wants to achieve. So
Hmm.
he should either be incredibly nervous or incredibly confident, because he's either doesn't think he can get out, or he knows he can get out. And right now, he's just kind of like, "Ugh, I'm hungry. If I had been killed, I wouldn't be hungry." It's like, okay. Um, like, I guess that's not out of character because we've had one other scene with you, but it's weird. It's like, I don't really think this is like, it's almost like I believe they had one idea for this character for like the first half of the episode, and then like the latter half of the episode, they were like, okay, but like it's actually this. And they want it
Hmm.
to be a
Hmm.
reveal, so they don't make it too serious at first. Because again,
Hmm.
he's very just odd, and it doesn't help that
Yeah.
he's wearing the Star Trek pajamas that everyone wears.
Yeah. Listen, everyone wants to be comfy wuffy arc in the future, okay?
Yeah, I mean, everyone just wears these like weird like jumper pajamas. But I sometimes have trouble taking certain people seriously when I see them wearing it. If it's not a Federation uniform, it looks like you're about to go to bed. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, some of those look
Hmm.
like you're about to go
Hmm.
take a nap. Not until we get to the Dominion War uniforms do I think like, all right, that's a uniform. But
Hmm. Hmm.
so they're trying to figure out exactly what he was trying to do. There'll be a trial to determine your guilt or innocence. Let's see. It's interesting that he puts it that way because, given what we know about how trials seem to work in the future, the fact that they need a trial to prove innocence, a little bit of a bad line there, Cisco.
Yeah. Wording is important, people.
Well, because
Remember.
I'm pretty sure, at least in TNG, they do have mention that, like, on our planet, we believe in innocent until proven guilty sort of deal. I'm pretty sure that's
Hmm.
mentioned once or twice in Star Trek, which, given how human centric Star Trek is, but it's also just a matter of, like, yeah, the people who write this probably think that's a good idea. So it's like, yeah, it's in the future too. So here it's like,
Hmm.
Cisco, you don't have a trial to determine someone's innocence. You have a trial to determine if they're guilty. Let's see.
Yep.
So they ask if he wants an advocate from his worlds to represent him. He says, "I doubt anyone on Rakar would care that much." And they learn that all crimes are serious on there. There's no trials. Again, another planet that has absolutely no concept of the justice system. And at this point, I think it's just a Star Trek
Well,
like normalcy. There's been one good trial in all of Star Trek, as far as I can recall, and that was Measure of a Man. Everything else is kind of just
well,
this. eh,
no, no, no. So I would say there's been two, and one's in the city. But it's not because it's a good like trial by our rules. It's a good it's good for showcasing the Cardassians and how they view justice and such, and like what's fucked up about their society.
Yeah, I guess
Like,
I wasn't thinking of that as like a. So I'm of two minds of this. First off, I wasn't really thinking of that as much of a trial because it's not really a trial. But
it's a kangaroo court. Yeah.
I agree with you. It is not. It's not a bad showing of how a certain culture handles crime. what I would say is, if I did have a criticism, there's the idea
Hmm.
that
The idea
any
that
society, oops, sorry, I got some feedback. Any society
Sorry.
sufficiently advanced enough to reach the stars probably has to have a lot of the similar things that humanity would also have and develop, such in the way of technology and the way we view things, unless they're, drastically different species. But most species in Star Trek are the same for, budgetary reasons and production reasons. So I'd
Yeah.
imagine most species would end up having we would have common senses of what justice is. There'd be a little bit of
Hmm.
a difference, but the idea, right, would be we're all moving towards a singular idea of a perfected form of justice. And
Hmm.
you'd think that all species, by the time they reach this hyper advanced state, they'd all achieve something close to that in that direction. I mean, I'm not saying it can't be different, but I guess in certain circumstances, it's just a bit odd. But admittedly, it works for the Cardassians because they had relatively recently undergone an entire restructuring of their entire society. So
Yeah.
them having some screwed up elements of their society is expected of them given the state of their. I'd
Yeah.
like to see a
Especially
Ferengi
since
trial. I'm not
this.
gonna lie.
Um.
It's all right. How expensive was your lawyer? Mine was 13 bars of latinum. Well, mine was 14. I guess you win then. He paid more. Clearly, he cared more about the outcome.
Uh. Uh. I. I don't really. I'm
I'm
like trying
mostly
to think
making that
like
joke.
would they well now I'm actually considering it. I don't even know if they would have they'd probably have not economic I'm trying to think I don't I mean I don't know. I really don't know if
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
gonna be real with you.
we've never seen their trials, but first off, I'd imagine all their punishments are monetary in nature. A fine of some sort. They probably
No,
don't even
no,
have
they make clear later on if you really fuck up by their rules, they will throw you from the Tower of Commerce. They will absolutely legally lynch you. They will destroy you.
look,
It's
look.
not just
This is where it's revealed that you can bypass that if you just pay your way out of it, but very few people can afford that.
oh yeah, listen. You want out of this jail?
See,
Actually, yeah. Who would
now I'm
handle it?
imagining. Sorry, now I'm imagining a trial where it's like the judge sits down and says, "Well, one side decided to bribe me more, so they win," and everyone's just like, "Fair, fair." Just the
Mm,
idea of
mm.
clearly, if the more you bribe the judge, the more you're committed and believe in your own innocence. So if you don't bribe the
Really,
judge, you don't believe in your innocence.
really, we should just go over the fringy one day of okay, let's figure out how this libertarian free market capitalism would actually work. Because it feels like if you could answer that about them, you could figure it out in real life. Like,
Yeah, the
it,
Cardassians are a little bit more. I mean, we'd have better examples of you could actually point out existing fascist governments in real life and be like, yeah, that's more or less how it would work out. So that's a little bit less fun.
yeah.
But I agree that
Y-
super hyper capitalist society would be a lot more interesting to sort of how would this actually function? Uh, given what we know and that oh god, you just reminded me of the there's the waiting room fee where if you go to see someone you have to wait in the waiting room, you have to tip the secretary, and then if you want to use one of the chairs you have to pay for it.
Yeah, and if you just want to stand, you still have to pay. It's
Yeah, there's a standing
mm,
fee and then there's a sitting in the chair fee. But
yep.
so god,
Mm.
the Ferengiers, they just nickel and dime everything. But anyway,
Yeah.
back to this other scene that's totally more interesting than talking more about Ferengi. Let's see. So they're basically trying to wonder why this guy is clearly seems to have a death wish. He attacked people randomly. He doesn't seem super committed to what he's doing. It's a shame that our first encounter with your species has to take place under certain circumstances, says Cisco. And Croden's like, hey, I'm sorry if I made things awkward. I didn't have much of a choice. Uh, and let's see. When asked, he says, look, my needs exceed my skills. Now, if I had his talents, he points to Odo. I would have no problem at all. I've never heard of a changeling with such versatility. And Odo, is like, wait a minute, a what? And Croden's like, yeah, a changeling. So this is the first reference to Odo's species outside of himself. And he
Hmm.
explains that, yeah, on the other side of the wormhole, he had assumed Odo had come from his side of the wormhole. So, it's a confirmation that Odo did come from the Gamma Quadrant. It's already been suspected, but this is a direct confirmation. And
Yeah.
Odo's basically like, wait a minute, you know about my kind? Uh, and then Odo basically accuses it to lie. He heard me talking about it in the bar to Quark about being a changeling, and Cronin's like, well, maybe I dissembled a little. Lying is hard work, but shapeshifters are harsh in their judgments. Feed me, and maybe I'll tell you where I met someone just like you. So again, like this is where the more cunning elements of the character come in, where it very
Hmm.
clearly he mentioned something to Odo that he knew Odo knew, and now he's using it to get what he wants. So this is the more cunning part, but stuff prior to this is kind of like it doesn't seem to be like as cunning. It doesn't seem like it was written to be spoken by someone who's cunning. It just seems like they were like
Hmm.
random lines. Here it's like no no
Hmm.
no. He clearly mentions the fact that Odo's a changeling as an offhanded comment because he knows how Odo would react, and then from there he steers it to, but I'm hungry. Maybe we can talk later. Like opening the door to what he wants. Uh, yeah, so that's a little bit more of the cunning character we get throughout the rest of this episode.
Hmm.
And let's see,
Who
one
wants
thing
a
I do
Pop
like,
Tart?
yeah, one thing I do like is we get our first characterization of changelings, which remains relatively consistent. Shapeshifters are harsh in their judgments, which we know that of Odo, but that's also pretty much just true of all changelings.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
part because of what changelings do, but that'll be explained more later. Here, it's like, yeah, Odo very much has a lot of the traits of his people, it seems, which that there's a, unlike with a lot of other species, which we mentioned it, I think, last episode about like Vulcans all being very similar in nature. Uh, a lot of that's it's Star Trek, right? You can't give every civilization that you're writing about as much depth as as you want. You have to really limit it
Yeah.
based on screen time. So you paint broad generalizations of certain aspects of their culture. Meanwhile, with Odo species, it makes entire sense why entire aspects of their culture are entirely the same, uh, based on the nature of like what they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we get to that scene ends with Odo basically not being very happy. This guy being very snarky. He's like, well, now I want some food. And let's see.
Mhm.
Um, Now we return to the command office, and they're basically talking about how to deal with this guy. Look, we have to contact his planet. It's not really the best way to introduce ourselves. Uh, I do like one line that Bashir says: "Homicide is a means to open relations. It's not exactly how they teach it in the academy, is it?" Uh, and and Kira asks like, "Oh, I think you're all wrong. They're going to thank us." And everyone's just kind of confused. Like, look, he probably committed all sorts of crimes in their system. That's why he's banished. That's what I would do if you were returning a criminal to me, so that we could probably get him punished. And yeah, so they're basically track down where his planet is and turn him in and reach out to his people to try and like figure out what you want done with him. Which I do like
Yeah.
this. It's a smaller part of this episode, but it's also very much in the realm of how do you deal with someone who's a criminal in your system, from a system that you have no relations with. You can't just punish him. You like, yeah, sure, he violated your laws, but you don't want to cause an intergalactic issue, especially with the Gamma Quadrant, which you know nothing about.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
So let's see. Oh, they also mentioned that as long as the Mirrodin ship is here, there's a threat to Croden. I don't want to have to tell his people that he was killed while in our custody, so they say that Odo will increase security. Pretty much just like good ship etiquette, good command etiquette. They're managing this stuff effectively. Uh,
I feel like they could have just kept him on some sort of charge of like, oh, you're in possession of a stolen good and such, and try to delay him that way if that's the issue. You know what I mean?
oh, you mean the Mirrodin?
Um, yeah, it's like, oh, he wants revenge specifically, so it's like, well, he had a weapon that he wasn't supposed to have on station, plus he had a stolen item in his possession. Just say you're holding him for the investigation until everything's cleared out, while
Yeah, I mean,
Mirrodin Boy is, I
I
mean,
don't think that. Yeah, that's not really their issue. I think their issue is more while he's here, he is a threat. Because like, I mean, on one hand, I don't know how much they really care about like putting this Mirrodin in prison. It's more of a side thing of like, look, you tried to commit a crime,
yeah,
one
but
of your
they
people
want to,
died. Obviously, they want to put it. They want to bring him on charges for possible theft, possible attempted homicide, you know, well, not even homicide because they were acting in self defense. It's really just potential threat. Like, I guess the question is like, do they want to go through the? I don't know like what they can do to this guy when they don't have any charges on him yet, and I don't know if they would know how to figure that out because yeah, I mean, first off, they'd have to prove that he knew because he's made the claim that he bought it off a merchant ship. So even if this exact item was stolen, then that doesn't mean it was stolen by him, and that doesn't mean that he, performed any
Well,
crime
I'm
in quote unquote purchasing it from someone else. So I agree with you. They could hold him for an investigation, but it doesn't seem
yeah.
like that's it doesn't seem like that's their concern. Their concern is while he's on the station, he's a threat to Croden.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is they can hold him for the investigation so he doesn't go after, like, basically
I know, but
cock
like
block it.
I guess they can keep him on the station. I don't think they could put him in a cell.
He would be under a criminal investigation and say, like, until that investigation is cleared, you are a potential flight risk.
Yeah, well,
Like,
that's the thing. They would cut off his ability to, leave with a ship, but they wouldn't. I don't know if they, I like. Again, they don't really cover holding procedures in Starfleet, like rules and stuff like that. They don't have any solid rules for it. Obviously, in real life, there are certain circumstances that while you're being investigated, you can be held for a certain number of hours after an arrest, where you have to, find solid evidence to prove. I believe, depending on the jurisdiction, it can be up to like 3 days.
hmm
But that sort of stuff is very like not like that stuff is very frowned upon, right? The idea of you're holding someone that you don't have any solid evidence against. Now, I don't know what the Federation's rules are. I don't know what Bajor's rules are when it comes to how you're allowed to hold a prisoner. I can, like I said, I can believe they can hold him on the station. I don't know if they can hold him in a cell, right?
hmm
Because, you know, like with a lot of Star Trek episodes, we don't know how long certain things are. Like we know Cisco and Dax, I believe, are going towards Croden's home planet to negotiate for him. I don't know how long that takes. Is it a few hours? Is it a few days? The show's always been kind of vague. Uh, and like even if you could hold who's the guy? It's Akel. Even if you could hold Akel in a prison cell for a few days, I don't think you could hold him for like a week, pending an investigation.
hmm
Especially an investigation that you're not really going to be able to find any solid proof on, assuming that
Yeah.
other than just saying, well, he's a liar. It's like, well, you can't. That's not really evidence. Uh, so yeah, I mean, it's
Well,
just one of those. Being in possession of stolen property versus being the one who stole it would be very different things. It's just like I don't think there's any like real point in arguing it because there's nothing we can really say definitively about how their justice system works. So it's just a matter of like, they'll probably like they're increasing security, right? That's probably the best thing the show can kind of say they do. Pike. Uh, oh, he died. All right, well, it's just me now. So I guess we'll try and continue the episode. Well, he's back.
oh, now I have no sound.
Oh,
Hello.
I can hear you. Oh, no. Well, this is the first instance of technical difficulties during a recording, and considering that we are already 48 minutes in, I'm not just going to end it here. Pike, can you hear me?
No, yes, I can hear you now. Okay. Yeah, the computer fucked up for a
All
brief
right.
second.
Yeah. No,
Um,
it's fine. It's fine. There was a brief moment of like awkward quietness when I was asking you a question and you didn't answer.
yeah,
But other than that,
first off, ask your question.
oh, I was just asking. Like, I don't think there's much reason to debate this. In part because we can't really definitively say what their justice system allows them to do.
Hmm.
So it's kind of just like, yeah, I guess increasing security is the best thing they could probably just do for this sort of as a presentation of what they're allowed to do to protect Croden. Increasing security is probably the best thing they're allowed to do. They could maybe they can
Uh,
restrict areas of access to the ship, but other than that, or the station, I don't think they can. I think they can hold them on the station. I don't know if they can hold them in a cell for that long.
Given what we know of Cisco's personality and what he's willing to do, I fully believe, like, listen, I can't technically do this, but it means we won't have a guy get killed,
Well,
right?
I
That
don't
we
know if
want
we're
to.
there with Cisco yet. Like we have some early bits of Cisco being a little bit more cavalier with how he behaves comparatively to historical like instances of Star Trek captains, you know, but I don't think he's at that point where he'd be willing to just blatantly violate the law, especially because we know it's Bajoran law, right? It's not even like
Mm.
it's not even like fully something he's in control of. It's okay. How does Bajor like rule that this person needs to be, held or imprisoned based on possession of potentially stolen goods?
Hmm.
So I don't think they can hold him in a cell. I'm sure they can hold him on the station though. I think that's probably the
Yeah.
extent of what Cisco could do, right? Like, all right, I'm kind of cheating the law here, saying, well, we're not going to hold you in a cell, but we're holding you on a station. So that's a little bit more in
Hmm.
the realm of like we're restricting your movement, but yeah. So that's
Yeah.
probably the most they can do. Anyway, we return to Quarks, and let's see. Oh yeah, Odo comes in and Quark's like, oh, like stop to see if I've run away yet. Odo's like, I couldn't get that lucky. That Croden is an interesting character, and let's see. Uh, oh, Quark basically is like, yeah, I wouldn't know. Uh, and Odo says, really? I thought you said you got to know him really well. And Quark's like, I didn't tell you that. I merely said we chatted when he bought a drink or two. So this is really Odo trying to get Quark to slip up and say he knew about
Yeah.
this whole circumstance, which would answer a lot of things. Let's see. They mentioned Morn. Oh, Odo says he's talked to several people and saw the two of you engaged in heavy conversation. Why? Morn here says you even bought the fellow a meal, and Quark's like, Morn should learn to keep his big mouth shut. The funny joke here is Morn never talks throughout the entire series.
Yep. This is the first time he said to talk, and he talks too much. And it's like,
Well, we
yeah.
we always get that. That's the very common joke is that everyone always talks about how Morn is a chatty person. We just never see it. So
He's also a suave man who's a great date, that sort of thing. Just
Dax is
mourn.
somewhat attracted to
Mourns.
him.
Yeah. Well, Dax has weird taste in men.
True, true. Hey, and you know what? I don't know. Maybe he's a very handsome member of his species. But
Mm,
anyway,
mm,
so let's see. Uh, Basically, Quark was like, "Look, I was just being friendly. I felt sorry for him. You should sympathize with my kindness." And Odo's like, "Yeah, but there's no profit in kindness."
true.
Let's see. Uh, Odo says like, "I think you were trying to secure passage back to the Gamma Quadrant for Croden in exchange for staging this tragic little robbery of yours." So, like, that's what Croden's goal was, right? Is Croden was trying to get back to the Gamma Quadrant. He needed some sort of ship, which is why I felt like his behavior early on was a little bit weird. And let's see. Quark mentions. Odo basically asks if he had talked about anything else. Quark says, "No, not really. Just like we didn't talk about anything except business, inconsequential things." And Odo says, "What's inconsequential to you may be important to me." Did he say anything about his homeworld or any of the other species of the Gamma Quadrant? So this is where I really do like this scene. It is Odo starts off basically interrogating Quark because he's trying to find proof against what to do with Croden and what to do with the Mirrodin. So he's
Hmm.
fulfilling the investigation, but as it goes on, he devolves into asking more and more about his own species because that's what his real concern is
Right.
right now. Which this is a very big deal because we know how serious Odo is about his sense of justice, both in the so technically the fourth episode, but the third one we've covered, which was what episode was that? That was
Uh.
A Man Alone. Uh,
Yeah.
we get a strong sense of who Odo is, and Odo would even essentially accuse himself of a crime if he felt he was the best suspect. Right? Even when he knows he's innocent, he's like, "You can't trust me. I very well could have had like motive, means, and opportunity to commit this crime." So he really kind of indicts himself on a lot of that because that's the kind
Yeah.
of person he is. He has an incredibly strong sense of justice. So now, for the first time, we are seeing him kind of abandon an investigation to pursue a more personal matter. But it's
Yeah.
entirely in character because the other like major aspect we know of him is that he's this loner who kind of longs to understand more about himself. There's this element
Hmm.
of he knows that he was found in the I believe the Deltorius belt or whatever the like asteroid belt,
Norius.
Denorius belt. Yeah, he was found in the Denorius belt, That's and that's where the wormhole was. So there's obviously this huge like question in his mind: Am I from the Gamma Quadrant? What's going on? Like, what is my role in all of this? Like, so he's very concerned about who he is. So to have him kind of abandon his core trait to explore this second one is such a great character thing, and I think it works
Yeah.
best because this is the second Odo episode. You know, other than
Yeah.
the little bits of it, sparkled through the rest of the series, like showing us the first episode where it's about his primary trait of being incredibly committed to justice, and then transitioning that to this episode where he becomes committed to something other than justice. He's not against justice here. I do want to preface that, right? He's not like,
Mhm.
violating any law or any sort of code of ethics that he holds, but he's basically putting his sense of justice on the back burner for a different question, which is not something he would
Yeah.
do. He would not. In episode 3, he didn't put his own. He didn't put his own like well-being ahead of an investigation, but here he's putting his question about himself ahead of an investigation. So it really sort of shows his mindset of what he values. He values himself less than the mystery about where he comes from. So,
Hmm.
I mean, honestly, it's just like this is why people like DS9, right? This is why Odo is probably one of the best characters in all of Star Trek, is because from relatively limited character interactions, we're a little more than halfway through the first season. We already have so much we can talk about Odo, and that's not even talking about all the other stuff we know about Odo, right? Like,
Yeah.
we know a lot more going forward about who he is as a person and why he is the way he is, but that's only with knowledge of future seasons. Here, it's like, no, this is all of it. All of this that we know of is only from the few episodes that we've gotten so far where he's been involved, and it's already incredibly in depth. Again, not to throw too much shade at TNG, right? But characters like Geordi were not this well developed even multiple seasons in, and that's
Yeah.
fine. Like, not everyone in DS9 is as developed as Odo right now, but like, I would say like there's a few characters in TNG that never get this kind of development, and like even some of the more focused characters like Picard, Riker, Data, Worf, like I think they Odo, I think, transcends them in any sort of character development and in character writing. Maybe not as
Mhm.
much Data, but definitely like Riker and Worf and Picard. So
Uh, Maybe not Picard. I think Picard gets pretty good, but
I mean, yeah,
like it's
I'm not saying like there's not like good stuff with Picard, but I guess I just mean like in terms of like the what we understand of his values and how solidly we understand that. With just like this alone, you could plop Odo in almost any situation, and I would have a rough idea of how he's going to act. There's some
yeah.
situations where, and again, some of this is the the not the flaw, but the nature of the more syndicated nature of TNG. There's a lot of circumstances where you kind of just like look up a card and think, yeah, by the final season, you're still very similar to who you were in the first season. There's not this same development and change and growth because the series really can't handle that. If you have
Mm-hmm.
one episode where Picard acts one way, and then you watch another episode and Picard's almost a completely different character, then you'd be like, well, wait, that doesn't make sense. Like, yeah, but you didn't watch these 2 episodes in between that develop Picard's character. It's like, well, they didn't have that in TNG, right? Every episode really more had to end in the status quo, and then move forward from there. And some of them expanded that development. That they pushed a little bit of the boundaries of the syndication format. There's increased relationships between characters. There's increased
Hmm.
character dynamics. Again, Data gets a lot of character development throughout the series, but with TNG or with DS9, it's like if you don't watch this episode, there's a lot you would not understand about Odo going forward.
Um, I for
If you disagree,
Picard,
go ahead.
I kind of disagree because there's like the thing with Picard is his big thing that develops is basically like his trauma as the series goes on. Uh, Specifically first with the Borg, where right after we get a whole episode of like yeah him basically having to deal with that trauma,
Yeah.
and then after that we have the torture stuff, but there's also the drumhead, the actual best trial thing again because not because it's a good trial in terms of like what's actually done, but because I don't know, I like a kangaroo court that's shown. But there's like, oh, that's thrown in his face, and he's visibly uncomfortable with that fact of. Uh, but then like I know in the oh, was it Nemesis? Was that the one where his brother and nephew died? I think that's the one. And he's like, oh yeah, like part of him getting over the Borg was having that comfort of family, but now it's like, oh, he's now all alone in
Yeah,
terms of
because
like family.
we know after the Borg when we saw him, he returned home briefly. He doesn't get along with his family really that well. So after
Yeah.
that situation, we see that happen. But I guess what I mean, right, is you do get that in TNG, but it's a
Hmm.
lot less. I guess it's a lot less it's a lot more scene or situation dependent rather than character dependent. Again, we talk about how does the events of the Borg impact him? It's like, well, we do get a few episodes where it comes up. The start of DS9 really does sort of bring that back to the forefront. We see sort of the
Hmm.
trauma go over Picard's face. Phenomenal actor, I'm not going to deny that, right? But I feel like there's a lot of episodes where even when they deal with the Borg, Picard doesn't seem traumatized, and that could just be he's a great captain, he doesn't show it, right? But that's kind of my issue is with TNG, a lot of things had to end at the status quo. And you can
Hmm.
explore some of those in a few episodes. Oh yeah, we have one or two episodes every season that really kind of, dissect Picard as a character based on his experiences throughout the series. But then it kind of goes back to the status quo. And there'll be episodes
Hmm.
where, you know, you couldn't even tell that Picard had any development because how he's acting is just how he should be acting as captain of the Enterprise and without too much in the way of development, detracting from that.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, like I said, as the series goes on, who Odo is as a person entirely changes. Like his sense of justice becomes redefined. Who he is as a person becomes redefined. You cannot look at Odo at the end. Like if you were to watch like an episode from if you were to watch A Man Alone and then watched an episode from season 7 of DS9, you'd be like, oh, so like they completely changed his character. Like if you didn't know that there was 6 seasons in between that, your first thought would be, why is Odo acting out of character? Because he had
Hmm.
changed so much. Meanwhile, even with characters like Picard, as much as he does change, and as long as again, there's a lot of phenomenal episodes of Picard. I'm not saying there isn't, but if you look at Picard from let's just say season like 2 or 3, and then look at season 7, you'd be like, yeah, it's the same guy. Like it's more or
Hmm.
less the exact same individual because by season 2 and 3, it's established who Picard is. So once you know him, like that's how far the series takes it. There's a few individual instances, and I think the movies do explore that a little bit more. I will agree with you on that, but that's because the movies are not really meant to be viewed like syndicated, right? Like the TV show was
Hmm.
made so that you could air kind of any episode at any point in time, and more or less be like, yeah, this is just what's on for Star Trek today, right? Like
Hmm.
we're gonna air season 5, episode 2 today, and it's like, well, do they need to know what happens in season 5, episode 1? It's like, no, they don't. Meanwhile, you really
Hmm.
can't do that with DS9. DS9, like, there's a lot of episodes you can do that with. We've talked about a few of the skippable episodes, with like Tosk and stuff like that, where, it's a good episode, but it's like you can kind of just plop this down at any point in time and be like, yeah, that was a DS9 episode. Meanwhile, if you
Hmm.
can't really watch this episode without watching A Man Alone, and you can't watch it without some of the other background information relating to Odo, because everything about who he is in this episode has been defined in the prior episodes and then re-examined.
Hmm.
I guess that's just what I'm saying, and maybe if you disagree, that's fine. But to me, it's just like I think Odo is far and above like pretty much anyone in TNG. I'd be willing to
Yeah,
debate
I'd be
if he's
willing to
above
debate
Data.
if
Oop. I'd be willing to debate if he's above
Yeah.
Data, but other than that, I'm pretty sure he's like, I mean, he's one of my S tier characters for this series,
Yeah.
and I think he loses out just because like there is two characters I technically like more, but I don't think they're as like I'm pretty sure Odo still is on par with them in terms of like character development. But yeah, so my little diatribe aside, we have the scene where Odo basically is like, look, after he's failed to sort of get any more information out of Quark, he says he contacts security contacts Odo and says that Akel and his crew are blocking the entrance to your office, and Odo basically has to like return and go deal with that situation. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So now it's like obstruction of like blocking the way to it's like I'm just saying lock them up and then it's like cool I'm gonna go take them and then when we come back we can
well,
deal with your trial.
I mean, yeah, it's even worse. It's not just blocking it. His line is like, "Look, understand me, shapeshifter. He killed the part of me that makes existence bearable. I cannot stop until I kill him." It's like, All right, well, that's when Odo locks him up.
Yep.
He's like, "You're
Right
not going to
there.
kill anyone. Go back to no." He does say, "Go back to the ship and stay there. If I find you again, I'll lock you up too." So the best thing I could say there, right, is basically putting him on like ship arrest is just as good for what he wants to do. But I agree, like you could just lock him in a cell. It's probably the safest thing. Uh,
Hmm.
but at the same time, like I do think there's a lot of elements of I could see even in real life if someone says this, like, look, I get it. This person like if someone had their their spouse killed, right, and then
Hmm.
said, I'm gonna kill that guy no matter what you do. It's like, well, I'm not gonna throw you in prison. Like I understand why you're saying this. I'm gonna tell you that you got to stay away from this guy. I'm gonna do what I can to make sure you don't do something stupid. But
Hmm.
you wouldn't really arrest that person because why they're acting the way they're acting is entirely reasonable. You might lock them up if you think they're going to take dangerous action, but like again, standing in front of the security office probably constitutes dangerous action here. It's like, oh, that's a little bit worrisome, and you have a whole crew. That's another thing that's worrisome.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, so uh, Akel does leave for now, and I do like the transcript where they're like, Croden has been fed. That was such a very important plot point, is that he was hungry. Now he's been fed. Uh, let's see. And then Croden does the "We're not so different, you and I" speech. You and I have a great deal in common, Changeling. We're both aliens here, the only ones of our kind. Each of us is alone, isolated, shut out. Uh,
Hmm.
Others like us only exist in the Gamma Quadrant. Again, this is him. This is him being a lot more clever. He's really hammering that nail of, I know you want your species. I know where they are. Uh, let's see. Odo basically says, I doubt the changelings on your world would trust you. And Croden said, of course not. There are no shapeshifters in Rakar. And he says, like, look, I'm sorry if I misled you. There were shapeshifters there, but that was centuries ago. Odo then asks, like, what happened? Croden says, like, look, they were persecuted, driven out, but I know a place where there are still some left. Of course, that was a few years ago. Uh, and Odo's like, look, if you had the chance, you take me there. Croden's like, sure, I would. Why not? Odin's like, hey, just tell me where it is. And Cronin's like, nah, that you're gonna have to bring me with you if you want to do that. Uh, and Odo is basically like, look, whatever your call, the truth isn't. Whatever you call it, the truth isn't in you. So Odo very clearly still like is thinking, this guy's just trying to play me. Um,
Hmm.
but then Croden pulls out his little locket, and it has this little. I love the way he shows off the locket too. I want to see if I can like play it. Uh, Hold on. He shows it off like it's an item at an auction. Like, ooh, look at this little locket. It's so nice and shiny.
Look at it.
And then he opens it.
What is it? Lock it. Shakes it
He
like keys for a
well,
baby.
he opens it. And I'm trying to see if the. Oh yeah. So he shows that there's this weird little. I'm just gonna call it what it is. It looks like a gusher. and like, and then it starts manipulating itself into this weird shape, the same way Odo does. Uh,
Hmm.
and of course, Odo is so like amazed by it. He does he opens the cell, grabs the locket, and closes it. And Odo like looks at the thing like amazed because, you know, I'm not gonna lie. My first thought would be, oh well, couldn't this just be technology that manipulates things the same way you do, Odo? Like this feels like it's not really a changeling like you are. It's a tiny little thing inside a locket. It's not really sentient. It just like, sort of like shifts around and moves around. But at the same time, like Odo might feel something for this thing. Like he can tell on a different level that this is a changeling like him. But yeah,
Possible. Yeah.
let's see. And let's see. Oh yeah, then we return to Dax and Cisco. They've gone to the planet and they contact it. Let's see. They meet with Hadron, who calls himself the Exarch of the Nihilic province, which Exarch's a pretty cool title.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did anything ever use it
Uh.
historically?
Exhart.
Exarch.
Uh. So it's really more it's so there. I know Byzantines did it like for governors of different provinces, and I think in the Orthodox Church it's used for certain like religious figures who are like lower than a patriarch. But yeah, it's an if it comes up, it's usually like late Roman or like in Byzantium, where there are governors of a particular territory. While in Eastern Orthodoxy, it's basically someone. We might as well just call it the equivalent of a bishop. Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
well, anyway, so they're basically saying like, look, if you have Croden, transport him to this location. Like, look, we haven't brought him. We're just here to tell you that we do have him in custody and he's on our space station. And he's like, let me explain where I come from. Like, we know where you're coming from. We know about the newly discovered passage. We just have simply had no interest in contacting anyone from your quadrant. Cisco's like,
Mm.
oh, well, I guess I'm sorry to hear that. But we'll certainly respect your wishes. We just felt it necessary after Croden was arrested. And basically, they're like, look, we requested he be returned immediately. Let's see. Cisco's like, look, he's scheduled to be tried for his crimes on our station. And they're like, look, he's already been determined guilty in absentia for a myriad of crimes on this world. That judgment supersedes your charges. Return him, and I can assure you his punishment will be appropriate to your crime as well as ours. Let's see. Yeah, he's acting insanely rude. Uh,
Yeah.
so, are you aware of the Dark Forest theory?
The Dark Forest theory. No, go ahead and tell
Well,
me. I do not know
it's
this.
an element of the Fermi paradox. The idea of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because Earth, we send out signals all the time, both intentionally and unintentionally. Like we send out radio signals, throughout space that could theoretically be picked up by receivers of these signals. And we see, also just radio waves go out into space all the time, and they're just going to keep going until they interact with something to stop them. So
Hmm.
the question is if we're doing that, why haven't other species doing that? Now the question is, are we just too far from them to pick any up? Which theoretically, if they've only just started sending them, we wouldn't see them for possibly millions of years.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. But the other question is that other species do exist out there, and they're intentionally not sending out signals because of the idea of the dark forest. Where if you're in a dark forest, you're not going to shout out, not because you're afraid of not because you want to find someone, but because you're afraid of what will hear you. And the idea
Yeah.
there is there's something dangerous in the galaxy. If you send out a radio wave, friendly things can hear it, so can unfriendly things. And
You know what
I
would be
guess
sad?
what?
It, if like two species did find themselves like that way, but they're on like opposite ends of the galaxy, and they like both decide to try and reach out to each other, and like eventually reach each other, but then one stopped hearing from the other, and it turns out their civilization would kaput, and they only
Oh,
come to
interesting.
find them when they're ruined. Yeah, I don't know. I
I
like to
remember
give sad ideas.
I remember I had a similar idea of like what if like life had developed on the moon or something, like the moon could sustain life. Uh
Hmm.
and there was life there, and it became a matter of like, yeah, we could see them, but we really couldn't interact with them for thousands upon thousands of years. You know,
Yeah.
you'd have like the ancient Greeks being like, yeah, we have telescopes and we could see like life on that like moon that's orbiting us. We see like animals, but no, but it's just like no, I don't think the Greeks had telescopes. I think it was more of the Renaissance era, but they had like advanced telescopes that could see the moon, and it's just like, well, we can see them there, but we can't really communicate. So that's unfortunate. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just, but that would be a neat little sci-fi story. But in this case, that's why I guess I assumed that like we have no interest of going through the wormhole. It's like, yeah, you don't know what's over there. It's pretty dangerous. And given what we know is in the Gamma Quadrant, it's very dangerous for the Federation to basically be sending ships here. It's like, ooh, yeah, you do know what you're about to encounter is going to completely reshape the entire series. Uh,
Mm.
but
Yep, it's gonna be fun.
one thing I would say, and I wish we had more context for it because maybe it could be justified. How this Exarch is acting is insanely like stupid. Like,
Yeah.
okay, these people, they come from the other side of the galaxy, so you have no idea what their disposition is. They could be friendly, they could be hostile. Your goal would be to basically, be palatable until you figure out what they want, right? Are they a species that respects power? Are they a species that respects kindness? Those sorts of
Hmm.
things. Uh, he just acts like rude immediately, and I'm like, okay, well, that'd be all fine and good if you wanted literally nothing to do with them, but you're basically demanding that they bring you something that they have. So,
Yeah.
like, unironically, this situation could have gone down with, hey, we have your prisoner. You will give him now, or else. It's like, oh, well, we're just gonna leave. Screw you
What are
guys.
you savages gonna do? You're stuck on your shitty little planet. You won't even come to the wormhole. Like,
Yeah, you've already admitted you're
this,
not sending people into the wormhole. Like,
yeah. Um, like,
now the
you know what?
Federation wouldn't act that
Like
way, but it's just yeah.
yeah, like it. I don't know why. This reminded me of a Babylon 5 thing. There's an episode there where what's known as a berserker probe comes to the station, and they don't realize that at first, and it gives them all these questions, right?
Hmm.
And they realize, and it promises, oh, if you can answer these, we'll give you great technology. But Sheridan realizes, like, wait a second, why would they care? Why would they, like, what would be the incentive to give over the information to another species that seems to be on the cusp of it? And he realized, like, oh, wait, this is a test to see if we're a potential threat to them. And if we answer these things, this thing will explode and just destroy us. Because it threatens to destroy them if they don't actually like give the answers. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's like, that's a pretty good way of like, if you just don't want to deal with them and you don't want them as a threat, just blow them the fuck up.
Yeah. I
If you
mean,
get those ready,
yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, like, here's the thing: these two things would be in conflict with each other. The Dark Force theory implies that you're afraid of what's out there, so you should act in a way that doesn't risk your own species. Now, if an
Hmm.
alien came to you, your first response again, you'd have to behave palatably, not like kind, not like overly kind, not overly angry. You basically have to behave really neutrally until you can
Hmm.
establish how you're supposed to act around this other species, and then
Hmm.
you adapt yourself to that circumstance. Meanwhile, it's like, yeah, this guy's first response is to start making demands and be very rude about it. It's like, okay, well, you're just really stupid.
You're gonna die. Goodbye.
Well, it's really dumb. It's like, man, I don't like this. Like, he's acting this way because I think they're trying to show the strictness of this planet, and like, because it's explained that like all crimes are treated incredibly serious to the point where there's no trials.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's an authoritarian thing of like,
yeah,
oh,
it very
and
much,
you're
yeah,
like
and
yeah,
yeah, so they're portrayed very
yeah,
negatively, which is like, okay, fine. At the same time, it's like your diplomacy has a lot to be desired. Which again, I guess
savages,
this is a
savages.
consistency of Gamma Quadrant species. There was the one species that was hunting Tosk. They behaved pretty much in the exact same way.
Yeah,
Like, they showed up,
yeah.
started making demands, started stepping over like some toes, and it's like, well, we're gonna treat you like a hostile enemy because that's how you clearly want to act. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that's just a little silly. But let's see here. Let's see. So Cisco basically says like, all right, we'll return him within 52 hours. So yeah, like this is going on. Like they basically drove, like they flew here, and they're gonna fly back, give or take a couple extra hours. That means that like the travel here is about a day.
Yeah.
It's about a day to
All
get
day.
to and back to this thing. So they're about a day travel back, and then another day travel, presuming after they take some security measures. So add a few hours there. Yeah, so like this, like I
Hmm.
said before, with like I don't think they could hold that one guy too long. It's like, yeah, this episode takes place over the course of like a week,
Yeah.
which is fine. Like that's actually fairly reasonable given that we're talking about space travel here.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So we then return to, let's see, the infirmary, where Bashir is basically scanning this thing. He's like, yep, they've confirmed it is the same sort of organic material that's pretty much identical to you. Uh, it has the same transitional stage between organic and inorganic. Let's see. Oh, Bashir basically makes a comment. It's like, this stone might be some sort of distant cousin of yours.
Stoner.
Um, which, I mean, again, Odo's not like an organic species, so yeah, I guess he would have just as much relationship to an inorganic object to a degree as he would an organic object. But
Yeah.
one thing I do want to point out, and this is actually consistent with what we learned later. We learned that Odo's species was persecuted on the home world of Rakar. So, like, we learned that that's actually true. A lot of the changelings were persecuted by the species that they
Well,
interacted with.
so here's the thing. There is the possibility of they're actually manipulating slash implanting that in like on other worlds of like
Yeah, that's getting a little
because
bit more
it.
high-minded there, but yeah.
I'm just saying it's like these nerds writing DS9 probably have read Dune, and uh you know what the Bene Gesserit did, right?
Yeah.
Do you, yeah, where it's like, oh, all these legends and such, they had various different legends they would use to cultivate society on planets. And like the one that the Fremen believe is like one of the most extreme ones because it's like, oh yeah, this place is fucking harsh. It's like, for all we know, these legends about changelings are something that they themselves implant in societies. Like they create the ideas so that if they ever need to manipulate these lesser species for some reason, in their mind, lesser species, it's like we have the justification for it. I don't know. Like,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't know.
we later do learn that the changelings are a lot more willing to manipulate people, but yeah, I guess it could be something that they cultivated intentionally. But anyway, so we return back to the detention cell, and now that Odo's confirmed that the stone is basically a changeling thing like him, he's still really invested. Uh, let's see. Um,
Hmm.
What? Oh, so again, they're both basically trying. They both are trying to get something out of the other, but they're not willing to compromise, right? So
Right.
Odo's trying to get. I need information on the stone from you, or where that location is that you said my people might be. Croton's like, yeah, but I'm not giving you that unless you help me out of here. And Odo's like, yeah, I'm not letting you out of here, so I'm not doing that. Um, let's see. Oh, yeah. At one point, Odo says, "Look, I feel nothing but contempt for you. You're a thief and a killer, and who knows what else." Croton says, "Typical. It's typical." And Odo basically comments of changing behavior. Yes, I'm sure. Uh, so it is funny that Odo is basically able to sense that yeah, I know what you're referring to here at this point. Um,
Yeah.
oh, and when Odo kind of wants to walk away, Croton's basically "excuse me" and holds his hand out for the locket. Because again, this is something that
Mm.
Odo is very clearly attached to as like a sign of his people, but
Hmm.
not compromising basically means he has to also hand it back. So it's like it's kind of the physical representation of the fact that you're not getting what you want here, Odo.
Hmm.
And then Odo basically comments, "Others will know where the changelings are." And Chrono's like, "No, no, no." Oh, so they make a point that in my sector there's a nebula called the Chamra Vortex, which is what the episode's named after. There are millions of
Hmm.
asteroids in it. I found this stone on one of them. I could take you to a changeling. And this is again, he's being a lot more cunning here. He's given a little bit of a piece of the information, but not the whole thing to Odo to try and entice Odo. And Odo's like, "Yeah, I'll figure it out myself." He's like, "No, no, no. The vortex is uncharted. A thief and killer like me, and who knows what else like me, who hid there often, found this colony, and I know my way back." Again, like this
Yeah.
character is almost completely different from the character we got in his first two scenes. He is incredibly cunning.
Yeah.
He's incredible. Like the way it's written is he's manipulating Odo the entire time, and he's not even hiding that fact, right? He like Odo's aware he's being manipulated, and the guy's like, "Yeah, I'm manipulating you. You know that." Like, but
Yep.
it's done so well that it's like, yeah, the only he has information that he knows Odo wants. Odo really can't like get it out of him any other way. So,
Yep.
admittedly, Odo. Oh wait, no, he doesn't. He doesn't know that person yet. But there are species within the Federations who can read minds. I want to point that out.
Yeah, but the issue is he doesn't have the justification to be able to use them in this situation.
I mean, do you need justification? We don't know
Uh,
if I don't know what like the rules are
so
relating to telepaths in Star Trek.
so there. Well, okay. Let me put it like this: if there was, let's say there was a section of the human population that had verifiable telepathic abilities and such, could read your mind at a glance. Um, what? So in the think about what that would mean for the issue of privacy, uh, and all that politics, and how would that work in court?
Oh,
That
no, I 100% agree with you. The
yeah,
Federation
yeah,
would have tons of rules relating to betazoids and other species that can read minds and how they're allowed to sort of
yeah.
be
So
used. Now, I will say TNG kind of ignores a lot of this with Deanna Troy. Even though she's not a full betazoid, she can still read people's emotions, which again, it's a bit of an invasion of privacy, but it is a military vessel. So there is a level of this is a tool at our disposal. We use it to fulfill our mission. I'm like, okay, fair. It's still a bit like dubious. At the same
Well,
time, this is
it's like
not the
this.
Federation. This is Bajor space on a Federation-controlled station, and Odo is not a member. Odo is a person who believes in his own sense of justice, not some laws.
But he's not operating on justice in this case.
True.
This is that basically he would be violating basically like because let's be fair, he is all for if he feels it's necessary to his job violating civil rights and liberties, right?
Yes.
Remember when he at one point complained like, if you want me to keep the peace, give me the power to do so. Let me crack down and such. And like the couple things he says like specifically is like, ooh, yes, Odo, we don't do that in Federation, and right now that's what we're operating on in terms of like the actual like how officers are supposed to behave. But he only does that if he basically there's no reason like justifiable reason for him to request one, even if he would want to. So it's like, yeah, and he wouldn't like trick like I don't think he would, since it's not in the name of justice, even though he's willing to sacrifice, like, well, not sacrifice, but he's willing to basically like side. He's willing to put his sense of law and order and justice on the side. He's not willing to violate his sense of law, order, and justice
I
for the
I
he.
agree. I agree with you. I guess more of what I'm pushing is like, yeah. I mean, that's fair. I think like Odo is definitely in conflict here, right? He's fighting between his desire to know his people, but also his desire to fulfill justice. The only man who presumably knows where his people are is about to be returned to his planet, and probably executed.
Oh yeah,
And
oh
and
yeah. These guys are gonna kill him.
yeah, and he. I guess my question would be more in the sense of I'd like Odo to almost entertain the possibility of using some other means of getting this information. Like, I don't think he would resort to torture, right? But I don't know.
He might say like, "Well, I could torture you," and the
Yeah,
comeback of like,
he would sort of threaten it, and then you could have a scene where Croton's like, all right, go ahead.
he wouldn't do that.
No, it's like he'd actually just like call Odo's bluff. He's like, go ahead, torture me. Like,
Yeah,
if you're gonna do it, like, you don't threaten to do it, you just do it. Uh,
yeah.
and it's
Which
just a
is
matter.
funny because have you actually read the studies about the effectiveness of torturing people?
I've read some. Most of them are that it's not consistent or that it's not reliable in any way.
Yeah, it's pretty much the best thing. Like the best you can do is just threaten them with it. If they don't respond to that, it's like, yeah, it's probably not gonna work. But so
Well, again,
yeah.
here's the problem with that though, and I don't want to get too much into the issues of torture because I don't really support it. But if you only threaten people with it, then the threat means nothing. You have to occasionally
Hmm.
enact it. It's like, yeah, the
Hmm.
actual use of torture is not useful, but if the threat of it is useful, it's like, well, then you have to torture people sometimes because
Yeah.
otherwise people will know it's an empty threat.
Basically,
So,
you need to like do just enough, and to technically other people, like just like let them hear the screams of somebody,
well, it's like
or let them watch you.
you we've seen it in something recently, but it's I believe who was the director who did it? It was like it wasn't there was a director who the joke would be that they would hire someone for the sole sake of firing them the first day on set.
Oh, we were um
Yeah, we watched an
um
episode of Friends where they covered that, but I can't remember who the director they mentioned was. And I've actually heard that from a different source as well. But it's like you hire someone for like one day, and then you fire them in front of everybody to really sort of set a standard of what you expect and how you're going to behave as a director or the boss of something. And I'm like, that's what we're jokingly suggesting you need to do
Orson
with
Welles.
Orson Welles. But that's what you have to jokingly say about like torture is like, yeah, you don't actually have to torture anybody, but you got to like show that you're torturing people. So it's like as you're walking into their cell, you should it's like these are where we torture people. This is the teeth pulling
Mm.
chamber. Did you ever play Grand Theft Auto 5?
Yeah, a little
Okay.
bit, yeah.
Do you remember the really? I know it was controversial, but I also just really didn't like it. You know the torture scene?
Vaguely, yeah,
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 I never liked that because you have to like do like 3 tortures to this person to get all the information. And
yeah.
it's not even like really a mini game. It's just kind of like a hit a button and do the thing. But
Press X to salute. Yeah, yeah.
do you remember like the different methods of torture?
No, I don't. What am I forgetting here, Hollix? You're go
No,
ahead
no,
and
no.
tell me.
So I remember thinking that like some of these are like okay, so they bring I think it was like Trevor they bring him into a room and he has to like torture the guy. There's a sledgehammer. There's like a pliers. There's a knife and there's a jerry can. And I remember
Hmm.
legitimately thinking that the jerry can was just filled with gasoline,
Hmm. Hmm.
but
Hmm.
it's water. It's waterboarding.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna lie, this is gonna sound terrible. I remember playing that and I'm thinking like, well, at least the waterboarding doesn't actually deal physical damage. Like
Yeah.
from the reports of
Mm.
it, waterboarding is probably like an incredibly effective and painful form of torture, and effective in the sense of it's torturous, not in the fact that it gets the information right, but it's
Hmm.
incredibly torturous. And I think like my thought process was like, okay, but like with the pliers, you're like pulling their teeth out, and that's like
Hmm.
permanent damage to a person. So that was always my thought
Yeah.
process on that. I'm like, I wouldn't want that done to me. I'd rather. It sucks regardless. I just did. It was like I didn't like that scene really at all. I didn't like having to be the one to torture someone. Maybe I'm a little bit of. I'm too
Yeah.
much of a baby to torture Pike.
You're too much of a baby. I'm sorry. Maybe we should tell them some stories of what you've done to me and other players in games you've run. Maybe we should tell them those stories of how
Emotional
you.
torture is fine. Physical torture, I'm against.
No. Oh, oh. Well, let me tell them about how
No.
literally you will pre-prepare, like you will put characters in front of us. So, like, I know exactly, you know us so psychologically well of like what we like. You just, yeah, like everyone, do not let Holmwicks like run a game for you, because oh, he will
You're
like,
making me sound worse
yeah,
than I am.
he's a great GM. He's a great GM, but sometimes he can legitimately cause you pain because it's like, oh,
Look,
please no.
it's not entirely my fault that Danny cried. She cries at everything.
Oh my god, I forgot she cried at one point. Which one was the cried at? Oh my
It's
god.
it was when her character's brother got kind of erased from everyone's memory.
Oh yeah.
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 So that was
Yeah.
let's stop talking about how I torture my players. This conversation has clearly gone on too long. But the point being is Odo basically looks like he's about to give up. He's like, I'm not doing this. I'm not playing your game. He gave the locket back, and he's not willing to do anything else to get the information. Uh, let's see. So Odo leaves and he has a conversation with Cisco. Let's see. Oh yeah, Cisco basically says, Constable, I want you to escort the prisoner back to his planet. He's not, and Odo's like, look, he's not going to stand trial here. It's like, look, their people apparently want him back, and the Bajorans have agreed to release him. We're going to have trouble getting him past the Miradorn. Yes, and I know Akel's been screening every ship that leaves the station. How soon can you be ready? Odo's like, look, I'm ready right now. Let's see. Oh, so they're basically coming up with a plan. They're going to use another freighter to basically mask their signature and escape through the interference. Uh, and Odo's like, look, I'm going to move the prisoner to the runabout right now. Da, 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 da. Yeah, and they're basically like, look, if they're going to take a runabout, they need to escape before he realizes it, because if he realizes it, their vessel's going to outrun them.
Hmm.
Now, one thing that I'm trying to think, like, there's no period of time. It's possible that Cisco has no knowledge of like Odo's struggle. If Cisco
Mm-hmm.
had any knowledge, there's 2 things that can happen. If Cisco had knowledge of like what Odo is basically struggling with, like if Bashir had made a comment, right, or if Odo had made a report himself, then Cisco basically has like two options. One, he doesn't allow Odo to make the prisoner transfer because
Mm-hmm.
he wouldn't necessarily trust the guy. The other option is that he
Mm-hmm.
would still allow it because he trusts Odo enough, which I can see it kind of going either way. I think I would lean towards Cisco would trust Odo enough not to do anything because he's mentioned he trusts Odo.
Mhm.
At the same time, the I don't know if Odo. I don't think Cisco
I don't
knows.
think so.
Mhm.
Like I guess the biggest issue, right, is Cisco was there when Croden mentioned the changelings for the first time. So he knows that Odo has probably some sort of emotional concern with this. I think the thing I would really like for this episode is if they had Cisco kind of bring that up. Like, how's everything been going with the prisoner? It's like our anything about that changeling stuff that he mentioned. If Cisco basically like followed up, because Cisco's been busy, right? He had to run to that planet, negotiate with them, and then come back. It's not like he's had time to like discuss this with Odo. But I think I would like a scene where Cisco kind of like pries a little bit.
Tries just a little bit.
All right. Well, yeah. So I think that would make it. I think that would make it a little bit better. But I think it's fine the way it is. But it's also. I remember thinking it was a little convenient that Odo, the guy who needs to that what he wants would require him to basically like let Croden out of his cell and get him to a runabout. Suddenly has free reign to just take this guy onto a runabout and do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
We mentioned that like I believe that they wouldn't have sent Odo alone. I think they would have sent him with another security officer.
Yeah, someone else to verify. Like,
Well, yeah, just like someone
this
to
is.
back up. Like
Yeah.
even if it's just like look, if you're one guy, he's one guy. Now you're obviously capable, but last thing you need is like this guy escaping and you having to deal with him yourself.
Yeah, or
So
you just being dead.
yeah, and so I think it's a little bit convenient that they only send Odo, and they do kind of make the point that they need the extra security to watch the Miradon ship. It's still a little bit like iffy. I feel like you could spare one Bajoran security officer to go with Odo, but that
Hmm.
wouldn't allow the episode to sort of progress the way it is. So it's a little bit of I think an issue.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get an image. Yes, Croden is handcuffed when he's like lit inside the runabout. Odo makes him sit down. Uh, let's see. Croden's basically like almost like trying to be annoying. He's like, "What's going on? What's that?" And Odo's like, "Yeah, you talk too much." Um. Oh yeah. Being what you are, you can pour your square shape into a round hole, but you never really fit, don't you? You're like my stone. Like he's just trying to like say stuff
My
to annoy Odo at
soul.
this point.
I mean, wouldn't you? Just,
And then
and if you
I
couldn't get away, just annoy him.
yeah, I mean like at this point it's like yeah, you lose nothing by annoying him.
Yeah.
Let's see. Uh Croden then says, maybe you're right. Perhaps that's how this all started when I was talking too much. Uh I asked too many questions. That's as good an explanation as any. And this is where Croden kind of acknowledges that you know, one night they came into my home. I was never told about, and to this day, I still don't know. They broke into my home just before dawn, and before I had time to stop them, they had murdered both my wives. So we know that they practice bigamy on his world. Uh,
Uh. Yep.
and the punishment
Yep.
for being an enemy of the people is the death of your family. I had no sophisticated weapons, only a short slaughter knife that I used for cutting the necks of fowl. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that the necks of the security officer were no more difficult to cut than the birds. Even the sound they made as the blade crossed their gullets were similar. It's like suddenly he's very menacing.
Yeah.
You expect me to believe this appalling tale? And Cronen's like, would it make any difference to you? And Odo's like, nope. So I mean, like, we don't really know if that's true or not. I mean, we can kind of assume that it probably is, because at this point, I
Probably.
don't know. Like, I mean, Cronin could just be lying. From what we know about the end of the story, like his actual story would probably work the same way. Is that he's basically being kind of cheated out of something, but like I'm willing to believe this story mostly because of like how it's present. The rest of the information is presented. It still feels very realistic that he's for some reason an enemy of the state, and they
Yeah.
don't.
Given how they acted, like,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, no trial. How they behaved when they just heard he still existed. It's like, because if it was a matter of they just didn't want him as part of their society anymore. If he was a murderer, right? If he was just like, oh yeah, he murdered like
Exiled.
10 people. Yeah, I mean, like, surely they wouldn't want him just exiled. But it's a matter of well, if another like organization has basically like arrested him. And they're going to try him. Like, we're not going to fight for the right to be the ones who punish him if he's just some guy. But if he's an enemy of the state, that might be a little bit more important because he might know something, or he might,
Hmm.
you know, they might want to make sure that what he knows never gets out, sort of deal.
Yeah.
Um, oh, and then Odo's like, yeah, if you don't stop talking, I could sedate you for the rest of the trip. And he's like, sorry, I didn't know I bothered you. Again, being just very snarky. Um,
Snark.
let's see. Da, 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 da. Hold on, where's the next scene? Oh yeah, this is the next scene. Um, da, da, da. So we get to Quark's bar, where I think Quark is counting his money.
Uh, Problem?
No, 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 no.
Da-da-da.
So the Mirrodin basically pulls Quark in, uh,
Mhm.
and shows him a lot of this like money, and asks, where's Crodon? Um, Quark's like, look, he's in security. He's like, no, you're hiding him. You've been in this together all along. Threatens Quark. Let's see. Uh, oh, let's see. Uh, Kel's basically like, why should I believe you that you say you're not like working with Croden? Tell me where Croden is, or you can die in his place. And Quark's like, look, I don't know where he is, but I can find out if you just release me. And then to Rom, he's like, give me the security chips, level 4 clearance. And this is funny because they just have like this little box filled with obviously a bunch of different level of security passes.
Mhm.
Let's see.
Uh, he's always
Uh,
prepared.
he's always prepared. Takes out one of the little the trilinear rods. Let's see. Um, the coordinates are very clearly state he's right here in the log entry. One more thing. Yeah, so basically, like it shows they haven't actually like the security basically like mislabels where Croden is. Um. Da, da, da. Oh, hold on. Yeah, so he find no, it's not that he mislabels it. He actually knows where Croden is. Now he knows he's in the Ganges ship, ready to take off. Let's see. And Rom's like, look, you're very clever, brother. Now Akel will rid us both of Croden and Odo. And Quark's basically like, unless Odo is sensible and gives up his prisoner. Rom's like, oh no, the Croden would tell Akel the truth about our plan. We're dead. We're dead. You shouldn't have told them how to find them. And Quark's like, be quiet. Odo would never give up his prisoner. He'd just get himself killed. And Rom's like, do you really think so? And Quark's like, oh, just get out of here. So I do like this scene because how
I
it's
do like it.
presented is Quark actually seems worried for Odo.
Yeah. But
Um,
he does always like in his own way care for Odo and vice versa. And it's like, oh, I won't have like he'll have to deal with someone new, but it's also like, oh, I won't have the guy I like with as the officer anymore.
yeah, I
And
mean
yeah.
it's nice because it shows the kind of respect he has for Odo. Is he basically trusts that yeah, like Odo would basically not Odo wouldn't give up the prisoner. Um,
Hmm.
so Quark's not really putting himself in too much danger doing this. At the same time, like he is hoping it seems that like Odo will give up the prisoner.
Hmm.
He doesn't seem happy that like basically like he was threatening to be killed if he didn't give up like Odo. But now that he's kind of done it, he's kind of worried. Oh man, hopefully Odo doesn't do a stupid thing here and like be the noble person. Meanwhile, Rom is just like, yay! If they die, they die, and if Akel talks to Croden, we're screwed.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep, and then the officers go through their plan. They use the interference to sort of throw out the Ganji ship so that they can get out without being detected. Let's see. Um, oh, hold on, it's weird. Oh yeah, no. Okay, so they mentioned that the Mirrodin ship is leaving the station.
Okay.
Uh,
Uh,
Cisco's trying to delay them, but they're not responding. They're still moving. And Cisco basically mentions how long before Odo reaches Rakar, and Dax basically mentions 5 hours, which feels like an inconsistency. Well, I guess it's not an inconsistency. We don't know how far the planet is. I just when Cisco mentioned that you'd have your prisoner in 52 hours, it's like, oh,
hmm.
okay. So how long was your planning for this? I guess he just gave himself some buffer time. It's like, look,
Yeah.
it takes me like 6 or so hours. It takes some amount of time to get back and forth. So we need that plus a certain amount of time to prepare a plan, plus a certain amount of time to discuss with Bajor. All those old details. Let's
Buffer time.
see. Buffer time. Let's see.
Buffer time.
Oh, and Cronin basically mentions you'd save time if you went through the vortex. It's a long way around it. Uh, again, they're doing this. He's doing this manipulation, trying to really kind of get him there. And then suddenly the Mirrodin vessel like tracks them. They're hailing him, saying you're going to surrender the Rakar prisoner to me. Odo says he's not going to do it. And suddenly their ship is being attacked. Let's see.
Yeah.
And they basically have to retreat into the vortex to hide. So Cronin
Hmm.
still kind of gets what he wants. Yeah, it's a little bit of convenience, but it's all like it's all established fairly well. Like
Yeah.
the vortex is near where they have to go. It's hidden and uncharted. It'll be safe to hide in there. And when being attacked by a superior vessel, that's the only thing you can do.
Yeah.
Um,
You got high.
and one thing I do like is I'm getting a lot of feedback from you, Pike.
I am sorry, man. Like,
It's fine. It's
Discord
fine.
fucked up.
Uh, so he says, you really have been through here before? And Cronin's like, yeah, sometimes I do tell the truth. So it does really put into question how much the rest is true. But yeah, so let's see. Oh yeah. When they're in there, the ship is following their impulse wake, so they basically have to disengage their engines, basic thrusters, and like maneuver around. They're able to
Hmm.
do it, but Cronin has to help. So this is kind of how Cronin kind of gets out of his handcuffs and is allowed to start operating alongside Odo. Let's see what happens next. Um, they do have a nice sort of claustrophobic scene where they have like darkness in the cockpit with all these like red lights going around. Uh, it's like it's obviously relatively low budget. We don't see like a lot of the great '90s special effects, but I think it works just as effectively because like it feels engaging. It feels like this is what you would see inside a ship if you were operating. Uh, yeah, and they have to land
Yeah.
inside. They have to land on one of the asteroids that Cronin wants them to land on to hide because they turn off their ship basically so they can lose this other ship. And when they get inside the cavern, let's see what happens here. Um, uh, they find what looks like a stasis pod. And turns out this is Cronin's daughter. He hid her in this stasis pod when he was on the run to keep her alive. She's the only member of his family left after the rest were killed. And
Hmm.
one thing I do kind of like about the scene is once they're here, a lot of Cronin's like confidence from some of the prior scenes vanishes, and he's all rushed. Again, this is kind of how the two ways he should be interacting in this episode is either kind of panicked and rushed because he has a job to do, or incredibly confident that he can get it done. So right now he's in
Hmm.
that sort of panicked mode where it's like, yeah, we're so close. I just need to get like a little bit further. So he's rushing, and it turns out the little gemstone that he'd shown Odo, the little tiny changeling, can also function as a key, and because it can take a unique shape, it can form and open the lock, which allows him to open the stasis chamber. Let's see, and then they
Yeah.
meet his daughter Yareth. She's a little bit like groggy, but then turns out the Mirrodins found out where they are and start shooting at the asteroid, which causes like earthquakes. Which we're going to ignore the fact that this asteroid seems to have some level of atmosphere. We're going to have to ignore that. Uh, I guess in theory,
Yeah.
an asteroid could have atmosphere, but it's really weird and unlikely, especially one large enough to be assaulted
Yeah.
by a ship, unless the entire belt is breathable air. But that wouldn't make a lot of sense either.
Yeah. Listen. Listen. They wanted to use the caves. They wanted to use. Okay. Shut up.
Yeah, well, they just never use like exosuits or astronaut suits basically, which they really should
Yeah.
have just like they really should splurge and have bought some like you could buy like really sleek looking futuristic ones, right? Like it's basically just clothes with a helmet on sort of deal. You could have done that,
Uh-huh.
but they never did that, even in TNG. So it's always just kind of like all right, I guess you're just going to this planet in your regular clothes. Hopefully, there's no like weird corrosive substance in the air.
Why not? Don't
Hopefully not.
die.
Let's see. And then we get what I like is a scene. Odo basically kind of realizes, okay, this is his daughter. He kind of tricked me to get here. There are no changelings. He just needed to rescue his daughter. Cronin apologizes. He's like, look, I'm sorry for eluding you. I have met changelings before, but it's been a very, very long time. Um, and Odo basically like Odo's basically like sad and reserved, like, okay, well, I guess I lost my opportunity to meet someone here. Uh, and he basically helps his daughter out. Uh, they leave. He's basically like, look, well, one thing I do like is Croden basically says like, look, I have to answer for my crimes, right? Croden's basically like, look, now
Yeah.
that I've saved my daughter, it doesn't matter what happens to me. I do like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's basically like, look, take my daughter far away, just make sure, because I'm assuming he was telling the truth when it came to, oh yeah, when you betray the state kills your family. That's the punishment. So she's in danger,
Yeah.
and like Odo, regardless of how Odo views justice, he wouldn't put a child in harm's way. So
Right.
he would basically be like, look, they don't know my daughter is alive, so you need to, take her back to your, the Alpha Quadrant, to like, just keep her safe. You can put her up for adoption in like a Alpha Quadrant Star Trek orphanage, but just make sure she stays
No,
away from my.
doesn't he say like he basically wants him to look
Yeah, he
out
does.
for her? Like,
He does say that, but like, what does that mean, right? Like, how long would Odo have to look out for her? Wouldn't it be just like, what if he just makes sure she finds another family? Is basically what I mean. Um, I don't know if he expected Odo to
no, no,
become
no.
her.
So Crota says, "I only have one last favor to ask. Yerif is alone in your world, just as you've always. She's going
True,
to need
that's
someone to
right.
look after. If you're asking, Odo said, if you're asking me what I think you're asking, Croden stops him. You know you could use some company. Deny
Yeah, no,
it,
you're
but we
right. You're
both
right.
know. Yeah. So
Yeah. Well, yeah. So so he does ask Odo to do it, and it's a nice little scene. But we do get a scene a little bit before that where they're trying to escape the asteroid, and I think this is a scene you referenced before. Odo gets hit by a rock.
yeah.
Yeah, and he falls down and he falls unconscious. Which again, you can make the point that he had formed a solid person and he didn't react in time, and as a result, he was like knocked unconscious. But that's kind of really consistent with what we know shape changers or shapeshifters to do.
Yeah.
Like the way it sort of is presented is like, unless you're doing some sort of weird energy damage from like a certain type of phaser, like you're really
Phasers or disruptors.
yeah, well,
That
yeah, that's what I mean,
would.
right? It's just unless you're doing some sort of energy damage, you're not going to be able to hurt these things. I think at one point they get like someone tries to stab them. I think one of the Klingons try and stab them, and yeah, they just immediately are like, yeah, I'm made of weird space jello, buddy. What did you expect? And but anyway, Croden's like, oh, Yerith asks like, oh, is he hurt? Croden's like, look, there's no way to tell. I don't know anything about his species. And hesitates for only a second, but then he's like, I'll carry him back to the ship.
Hmm.
Uh, and like the daughter kind of realizes like, what's the matter? And he's like, yeah, nothing, nothing. Don't worry about it. Like he realizes, if I just leave him here, I can make an escape with my daughter. But he doesn't do that. He picks up Odo and they leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
How would his daughter look at that? And it's like,
well, I don't even think it's that. I think he actually has like enough respect for Odo that he's like, look, you helped me get my daughter back. Because I
mhm,
think I'm not gonna lie, I don't know. We can't really say too much about Croden, but I would definitely say that I don't think he'd mind if his daughter like saw him leave someone for death. That's kind of why he says I don't know about his species. I think he'd be like, yeah, I'm not glad that she saw that, but at the same time, I want to survive and I want to survive and take care of my daughter. If like, I think he would be selfish about it, but I think he respects Odo too much. I think at this point he kind of realizes the kind of person Odo is, and again, I don't think Croden's a bad guy. I'm pretty sure most of what his government says about him is false. I think Croden's a pretty decent
yeah.
person, and he mentioned before I don't have the skills for this job. He's not a hitman, right? He's not some sort of mercenary or person who's of ill repute that has to survive in the galaxy by being malicious. So he's kind of just a guy, a father who unfortunately fell on the wrong side of the law and is on the run now. That's
Hmm.
that. And yeah, so Odo wakes up on the ship and he notices that Croden's been flying it. Odo's like, look, you could have left me behind. Don't thank me. I already regret it. Let's see. They need to escape the Miradorn ship, and remind me how they do that. I think they basically lure him to like a pocket of explosive stuff, disengage their ship.
Uh, I think the
Yeah, they.
vortex is no, no, no. So basically, they know that this guy won't know that if he no. So yeah, basically they get him to go into a field where
With
fires on them,
explosive
it
gas.
will ignite. Yeah, it's like yep,
Yeah,
yep.
so they would. they would use like explosive gas, and if they did that, then like so they have to disengage their engines, and then they're gonna ride the explosive wave out of the vortex. Uh, they manage to succeed. The Miradorn ship is destroyed. It and all Akel and all its crew. You know,
Yep.
these guys are basically trying to kill these people, so it's not really that big of a deal.
It's fair game.
Yeah, it's fair game, really. Um, and then let's see. We get some cool visuals. Like we get like the cool like nebula look. Like it's like a purple vortex nebula. It's a nice little some nice visuals.
Preach.
And let's see. I'm trying to find like the exact lines because it's nice. Oh yeah. After the explosion, their ship is a bit damaged, and they get hailed by a Vulcan ship. They're like, hey, we're a Vulcan science vessel coming back from the Gamma Quadrant. Like, they're in the Gamma Quadrant, but they're heading back to the wormhole. Do you need us to pick you up and tow you? And Odo's like, yeah, I'm chief of security for DS9. Like, I needed that to happen. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Let's see. Odo basically says, like, after a brief moment, Odo basically says, like, look, I beamed over 2 survivors from the exploded ship. The rest of it wasn't so lucky. I've completed my mission. Can you please give them transport to Vulcan? And the Vulcan person's, agree. The Vulcan captain agrees. Crodon, like, sort of looks at Odo, like, amazed, like, oh my god, you're, like, letting us go. And Odo, repeats the line, don't thank me, I already regret it.
Yeah.
So, I think it's hard to say, right? Because I think this is still Odo following his sense of justice. These people saved him, so he's saving them back, right? It's a
Yeah.
very clear. But it's also a lot less strict than he normally is. He's being a little bit flexible here, right? He's like, I'm letting you escape justice because you saved me, and also because of your daughter. At the same time,
Plus, it's questionable what that just
true,
if
true.
that law is.
Yeah. So he's basically just saying, like, they're basically going to report, yeah, everyone died in the explosion on the in the belt. It's oh yeah, the guy you wanted's dead, and now he's just going to go live a life on Vulcan with his daughter.
Yep.
And let's see. Oh yeah, Cronin does say, like, how will you explain it? I'll just say you were killed by Akel's torpedoes. Let's see. Cronin says, like you, but I know where my home is, and perhaps someday you'll be able to get back to yours too.
Hang
I
on,
hope this
Holly.
helps you. Oh, sorry. Hold on.
Trying
What's
to
going on?
on.
Oh, anyway, I'll finish this up without him. So, like, he Cronin gives the amulet back to Odo, hoping it's like a nice piece of his of his people that he can go with, that he can sort of be with, and he puts the locket around Odo's neck, and they are transported back to the Alpha Quadrant. Let's see. Yeah, and that's more or less it. Odo does. There's one more scene. Odo sort of like looks at the little amulet, looks at it transform. He says, someday we'll know,
Gosh.
we'll know where we belong, cousin. And then he engages the engines, and they head out. So,
Gosh.
oh yeah, the little gusher trinket. But yeah, so that is the Vortex. A really good Odo episode. And there's
Yeah.
little bits and pieces there that we sort of nitpicked and critiqued. Some of which are legitimate problems. Some of which are more like, is this an issue?
We're just assholes.
Well, I
We're just
mean, that's what we're here for, right? At the end of the day, we're here to talk about how great the series is, and that means we have to point out the areas where it doesn't always meet that standard. But the thing is, this episode is very good. A lot of great world building, a lot of great stuff with Odo and Quark. Decent stuff with the rest of the commanding officers. Like, there's nothing super well to praise, but nothing to criticize. They act like entirely in character and entirely worthy of their positions. Cisco makes
Yeah.
decisions as you'd expect a commander to make. No one's acting out of character. Again, I would say probably the biggest issue in this episode is that they don't send someone else with Odo, because that would kind of compromise
Yeah.
this emotional payoff here. But you'd expect them to send 2 people to transport a prisoner. You know,
Yeah.
Probably more, but like in this case, like only sending Odo is a little bit questionable, and that's
If it was
assuming
Odo and
this.
one other person, how strong Odo is on power scaling, it's like, okay, that's. But if it's just Odo, it's like,
Well, it's not even like that, right? It's just like the reason they don't do it is so they can facilitate the sending. That's kind of the reason it's the biggest issue. Is
yeah,
that the best part of the episode? This like these emotional payoffs of like Odo allowing this guy to leave and this guy saving Odo's life. All that is because we don't have another character kind of bogging these scenes down. If you sent Kira here, the scene where Croden goes to help Odo wouldn't be really as meaningful because, well, Kira could help Odo. And if Croden tries to like leave Odo, Kira would threaten him or something like that, right? Where it would change the scenes fundamentally. So, like, that's probably the biggest issue. We get a few like inconsistencies with Odo's transformation stuff, but even that's not like too bad. It's more of like, well, I guess that's just how it works. It's not really super consistent with what we know later on, but as it is now, I guess that's fine. And yeah, more or less like probably one of my favorite episodes this season. The Nagus is still better. And Duet is better, but I like the Nagus more than Duet. I definitely put this as probably an A tier episode.
Yeah, I can go with that. It's an A
Like
tier, right?
there's a few mistakes, but ultimately a lot of great character work, and stuff that builds up a lot of the stuff later in the series. I mean, really anything with Odo is going to start building stuff up for the series. So that's always a great little bit of a nugget of information that we always get. Whenever we learn something about Odo, we're really learning stuff about his people, which are a big part of where the series is going.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all right, I think we are more or less done. We had some technical difficulties this episode, but hopefully it doesn't
Let me
hinder
guess, you're
the.
gonna ask me something, then you're gonna cut me off, aren't you?
I'm not going to do that. I was talking about our technical difficulties, Pike.
Uh,
Gosh, you just assumed
sure.
the worst of me. Why do you think it? Why do you think that way?